So when did you jump into crypto, after obviously the e-commerce exit and so on? So take us through that business model just more in depth and give us an example of a campaign, for example, that was very successful. And how does the process work to join as a creator on Rug Radio? It seems that you guys have created such a big platform today that, even though it's decentralized, it must be a process. And how do you guys also, like the block and so on as a really, really trustworthy source of news? So I would love to dissect that model also with you today, because talking about aggregation and then talking about the business model in general. For example, I spoke to Jason at Blockworks, and obviously they have permissionless, as a specific event to drive a lot of revenue. And listening to Jason on a specific podcast, he breaks down obviously the revenue models, and the event is huge. That's how they started, right? Is that something that in the next 5 to 10 years you guys are looking to do as well? Hey guys, welcome to the Reporters Roundtable, where we'll be diving into the stories behind the stories as we sit down with a journalist, in this case, media operator, who are shaping the narrative of Web3, blockchain, and the future of finance. From breaking news to in-depth investigations, these are the voices that bring clarity to the complex and ever-evolving world of crypto. And we're here to explain not just the news that they report on, but also their journey, insights, and what drives them to cover this revolutionary space. And in the second episode today, we've got Loxley Fernandes, CEO and founder of Decrypt, Rug Radio, and Dastan, which is the holding company today. So great to have you on board, Loxley. I do appreciate you taking your time on this. I know you're super, super busy. And you just recovered from Token as well. In terms of starting everything off, I think it'd be great to get a quick introduction about yourself, who you are, and obviously, what you do in general, and so on as well. So I'll let you take it off.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. No, I'm glad to be here. We had a crazy few weeks going from WebEx in Japan to Korea for KBW, and then terminating in Singapore, and saw a lot of people. Actually, that's where you and I met, was in Korea, and I think it's a great circuit for everyone every year, but it is exhausting. So happy to be here though, and give you a little bit of background on myself. I started my career. I was one of those entrepreneurial kids in university who couldn't stay in class because we were consistently trying to build and create something, right? And so I found myself very distracted in my university years, building companies. At the time, we're talking like 2007 to 2010, 11-ish or so. The e-commerce space was still young and fledgling. And there was a lot of opportunity there from not only just the retail aspect, but from the infrastructure side. And so I, being much more of an operator and not necessarily a technical founder and an engineer myself, built a team after building a decently successful e-com business and platform. Ended up playing into the financial technologies associated with online and digital commerce, and looking at innovations around digital purchases and microfinancing for e-com purchases and payment processing ultimately. And so spent a few years in that space, built a few businesses. Some that were pretty successful, and some of them that were not so much. Made a lot of mistakes, learned a lot of lessons, but ultimately, in the end, was fortunate enough to have one of our platforms, our flagship platform, that we were able to successfully exit and kind of launchpad myself into the career and kind of the life that I wanted and that I'd always hoped for. And over the years, like, a culmination of my experiences and all these things eventually led me down the path of blockchain and the crypto currency ecosystem, and ultimately to where I am now at Decrypt and Rug Radio.
Amazing. You know what? I wish I got into the e-com space that early. I remember 2012, you would print cash with Facebook ads. It was that easy. Apparently, you just put like a picture of something and just ask people to buy it, and the traffic would go there.
It was interesting in those years. You know, there was a cohort of us in 2009 to 2011, specifically like around the time that Instagram made it to the market, that really mastered the lookalike audience, right? And we were able to leverage Facebook advertising and create really like an incredible flywheel. But yeah, it was definitely like it was definitely like a bull runish type moment in market. Like we've seen it happen a few times in the crypto sphere as well, where it's like everything's up only, and for a few years there we definitely had a very up only experience.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, obviously today it's a bit more saturated in general, but you came at the right time. When did you do your first exit?
First exit was December 2014. How old was I?
Yeah, at the first.
I was just about to turn 25. I was just turning 25 at the time. So from the ages of like 20 through 25, we built a platform at the time. And just like to give some rough numbers, like, so, to kind of give like the scope of it, we had built our e-com sales, mostly third-party marketplace, but we were doing, we were authorized retailers for a lot of luxury brands. And we were doing third-party marketplace retail, and at our peak had broken about 30 million in revenue. And so for like an idiot kid in his 20s with a very small team, our team at the core was 6 employees, and we owned our own warehouse. We did our own fulfillment. We were doing our own marketing. We were doing everything. And then we expanded to contractors and ended up playing in the fulfillment space and really getting into digital, like e-com business services, fulfillment, customer service, shared economy, and all of that. And it expanded into basically a little incubator type space that ended up spawning a lot of like really great platforms. But yeah, that was the beginning of it. Well, not the beginning of it, but that was when we first started finding success.
Well, that's amazing, because like if you think about it, that's pretty early age to exit, and it seems that again, like with most things, it's all about timing as well. And I think that schools made for specific people that can follow a specific structure and go up the ladder in general, but creativity spawns across also understanding timings of the market and where to jump into. And I think you found that. I think we found that with crypto, actually jumping at the right time. So it seems like you're very good at timing about jumping into things. So when did you jump into crypto, after obviously the e-commerce exit and so on? What was the timing of that?
So my first experience was 2013, early 2013. I bought Bitcoin. Had a friend who was a university, also entrepreneurial kid, but was one of my roommates, in my early years of university. And he was hanging out at my apartment, and he was like, "Dude, you gotta buy Bitcoin." And I was like, and this kid was always onto something, right? He's like, just crazy, always onto something new. You gotta buy Bitcoin. And I was like, what are you talking about? So he showed me, convinced me. At that time, like the game for Bitcoin was weird, right? Like there was very few wallet options. Like the majority of us were like still trying to figure out like what these redemption coupons that you could buy on like eBay. You could buy eBay like redemption coupons for like Bitcoin and basically like merge these codes on chain and claim the tokens. And so we played that game and through. At the time, like it was a significant amount of money. Now I look back and I wish I would have spent more money on it. But bought Bitcoin 2013. Watched the markets very loosely. I wasn't a very active participant. I watched the markets loosely, and I guess the good news for me is like it wasn't a significant enough amount of money that when the markets moved up from like the high 100s and $200 price points that we bought in, when they started moving up at the time. It wasn't like I had a lot of risk on the table. And so I didn't feel an urgency or a need to sell. At one point I thought about selling the Bitcoin and I couldn't figure out how to do it. And so that inevitably looked kind of like a diamond hand move long term, but it was largely unintentional. And then, it wasn't until late 2016, the same guy called me and asked me if I wanted to fund an Ethereum mining farm. He wanted to buy a bunch of GPUs, and that was another one of these moments where I was like, what are you talking about? I had no clue. And he put me on some reading materials, and then I came across, not specific around the Ethereum and utility token white papers or anything, but just some philosophical readings around why digital currencies, why blockchain, why the age of information and data, and really the quantification and commercialization of data would be impactful. And that's what really sold me. And so by early 2017, I wrote him a check to help him fund this GPU ETH mining farm. And it turns out that at that time, again, that was a fantastic timing. And we mined Ethereum all the way through the merge, and ended up building. With him, built a substantial amount of GPUs. I think at the peak, we were pushing a few hundred RTX 3080s that were mining Ethereum through some mining pools, and played that game. And that gave us a really good kickoff. But that was, I would say, that moment, 2017, is when I became actively engaged in blockchain and the crypto universe, and trying to understand how and where this was going.
That's crazy. If I had a friend at that time tell me one of those things as well, it's good that you did your research as well. I would have thought, I know what you're talking about, just pass on it, but that obviously that research gave you a lot of leverage to where you are today. And 2017 was still very early. I mean, based on that then, so you did the exit, you learned about Ethereum, about mining, about the key concepts of obviously of crypto in general, and then obviously you then built Rug Radio. Am I right, or was there something in between before Rug Radio? Because I think that was your first tips into the radio space, right?
Yeah, there was a lot. There was a lot in between those years. I participated in a lot of businesses and learned a lot. We say luck is where opportunity meets preparation. And really, if I look historically back at all the things that I've done, everything up until this point was preparation. And as a serial entrepreneur, you're always looking for the right opportunity. And I had been presented with a number of opportunities. I played the DeFi game, sometimes actively, sometimes passively, while I was doing a number of other things, funding other businesses, playing, kind of the small business. We'll call it IRL yield farming, right? The small boutique VC, boutique family office type game where we're acquiring assets and trying to build small businesses, some in the direct to consumer space and in some other spaces that we thought were good for wealth creation and wealth preservation. And what ended up happening is, I was a little late to the NFT space. I was one of these guys, just a perpetual mid curve. I saw it and I thought it was so stupid, and I was taking myself too seriously, thinking about our DeFi exposure, that I couldn't imagine spending, ETH on JPEGs, which is funny because I was an art collector. I collected physical art for a number of years. Is one of the ways I diversified my portfolio. But it just didn't make sense to me at the time. And it wasn't until a few months in, actually through Farouk and a few of the other guys that we work with today, that I realized they were onto something that I was missing out on, and started to make a push in that direction and really force myself into that space. And then, late 2021, Farouk had spun up the concept and the idea of Rug Radio, founded it, put it together, and found himself wanting and needing some support and looking for some talent to help him, with some experience, who had built businesses, who had understood how to take maybe distribution and take the power of the attention economy and like parlay that into an exponential growth business model. And so he called me, called a few others, Mike Kriak, who's the CEO of Consensus Mesh, and Mando, who's founder of Canary Labs and just an epic trader and a brilliant mind. But he called us and asked us to come help him build this platform called Rug Radio. And so we all unequivocally said yes. We believed in Farouk. We believed in what he was doing, and we saw an opportunity. We knew that our preparation had was sufficient enough to help us take that opportunity and make it look like luck. And so we all dove in. And then 2022, Rug Radio kicks off, and we make a strong push for growth and building a cash flow positive entity and focusing on innovating the media model. But yeah, so that's how that history came together.
That's really interesting because like 2022 until now, it's been such an exponential growth that we see Farouk interviewing Donald Trump on Spaces. It's gone to those heights. Which is unreal. When you think about it, it's just it's the craziest story ever.
And he just announced today, I don't know if you saw on Twitter, but just announced today that last weekend we also had Mark Cuban join him for 75 minutes of interview, and so that drops later this week. You'll get to see the whole interview between Farouk and Mark Cuban, which is really a stellar piece of content. But continue.
Yeah, I mean, again, just like it makes you think a lot about today. In terms of like the level of communication, in terms of innovation, where it's gone, where like these players are understanding more of the game, how to get to this generation in general, and that's really something, as you mentioned before, that you guys prepared for and kind of foresee, like foresaw that down the line this would happen. So based on that, then for our listeners, break down the model of how Rug Radio works, because it's very innovative. It's not your Web2 media radio stations and so on. So I think it'd be good to understand how you guys have innovated and why you were so ingrained into Farouk's vision of pushing this through.
Yeah. So if you look at Rug Radio, what's interesting is if you look, well, let's take it back and I'll give you a quick macro view of our ecosystem. Our parent company, Dastan, holding company that Farouk and I founded together to start acquiring more media platforms and ultimately to bridge them together with innovative technologies. And I'll talk about that here in a little bit too, I'm sure. But that company now owns both Decrypt and Rug Radio wholly. We formed that parent company as a result of our desire to merge Rug Radio and Decrypt, and needed a vehicle to house those IPs and to give them the ability to operate autonomously, but to share economy of operations, resources, commercial teams, those types of things. Really, just like trying to figure out how do you optimize and streamline your expenditures and make sure that you're building a lean model and maximize the benefit of all of those inputs for not just the one media company but multiple media companies. So if you look at like Rug Radio, and we can talk about Decrypt shortly too, but like Rug Radio is really like a new age media model in that and you can see parallels, right? Like there's groups that do similar things, but ultimately it wasn't necessarily even about owning IP. It was about empowering content creators, independent content creators, which if you look at traditional publishing, it is in trouble in a big way, and the creator economy is growing at such rapid scale because the democratization, right, and the distribution of like resources and really is the future of how we're going to find sustainability in media. But what we wanted to do is we wanted to find content creators who shared a similar ethos with us, support them from an organizational perspective with economies of scale in commercial team, in production, in distribution, right, and create this network, a collective voice that would be able to craft and help content creators to own the narrative instead of just being subjected to like the the pressures and maybe some of the constraints that platforms like Facebook and Instagram and and Google have imposed on content creators and publishers, and really give them the ability to say, hey, we want to distribute to audience, we want to do it in our way, we want to commercialize how, when, and where we want, and we want to do this together in a shared way. So Rug Radio ultimately was just a collective of content creators. What we were able to do to kind of like break down the business model is, when you have a bunch of content creators with a shared mission coming together who have tens of millions of monthly impressions on their content, it becomes a lot easier for us to go to our pipeline of businesses and partners and say to companies like Uniswap or companies like Louis Vuitton or Givenchy, and I mean, like everything, Nike, Adidas, a lot of these companies that we've worked with, not only just Web3 specific companies, but say, hey, look, this is not a one-off. They're like, we're not trying to pitch a one-off creator. We want to give you access to an entire network of creators. And this is how we can proliferate your message. This is how we can help you craft narratives. This is how we can capture value in an attention economy. And we can do it in a way that is cost effective, because we'll package all of this together, give you a discount on the group, and the group knows that each individual is going to get paid because they're able to do it with the support of other content creators, right? And that's really the business model that we put together over the first few years. We were able to do some incredible campaigns and millions of dollars of ad revenue from major companies, from small companies, but also from like some major multinational companies who probably wouldn't have given content creators independently a shot. Right? But they were able to do it because of the network and really the brand value collectively that we put together.
So take us through that business model just more in depth, and give us an example of a campaign, for example, that was very successful.
Yeah. So, I mean, we can roll back to, let's go back to like, for instance, like Consensus. Consensus Software, who owns MetaMask, we're very close to them. We did a campaign once upon a time with MetaMask, where they said, hey, we have 3 months, we have new features, we have new branding, we have some different stuff that we want to deploy. You guys have a very crypto native audience. Your collective of content creators represent very diverse niches within the Web3 and crypto space. It wasn't just NFT influencers. We had macro traders, we had DeFi guys, we had NFT collectors, traders, the key opinion leaders in the space, influencers, but also artists and other individuals who used MetaMask in different ways and spoke to different audiences. And so ultimately, we were able to go through, help a company like MetaMask determine what their KPIs were, like how do you define success in a marketing and a media campaign? And from there, how can we cater to that? And how can we create solutions for you? And so, listening to the client is the key to success with any of these things. But ultimately, you hear what they have to say. You gauge how long they're able to engage for and what their budget is. And then we optimize that budget by distributing it to different content creators. Rug Radio as an entity would always take a percentage for facilitating the deal. We had operations, we had administration, we had sales teams and all of that who had to get paid. We also had to support the balance sheet. But at the end of the day, a huge percentage, the majority of our revenues were going directly to the content creators at the time. So we had guys like Farouk, guys like, Thread Guy and Michaela, Leap, and many others. Like right now we have about 85 independent content creators that we work with. We just take a client, show them where the value add is, help them understand like really the on-chain impact really of each of these content creators as well, and then just maximize their budget and their tolerance for spend by distributing it to independent content creators.
And does this work through do the content creators create their own content based on what's given to them, or does it go through like an ad onto like the YouTube channel? How does it work specifically?
Most of it was branded content. So we've done things like banner ads, especially now with Decrypt, we do a lot of display advertising and stuff as well. Yeah. But through the Rug Radio specific model, it was all bespoke packages and branded content. It was getting a creator to learn a product, appreciate the product, be able to talk about it in an authentic way, but also, honor the FTC guidelines around disclosures and disclaimers, and saying that this is organic content that's being created for a sponsored post, right? It's like, these are my organic opinions. This is my experience with the product. This is what this is what we feel about it. And we're being financially supported by someone like MetaMask, right, to be able to bring you this content. And that's how we played the game.
And how does the process work to join as a creator on Rug Radio? It seems that you guys have created such a big platform today that, even though it's decentralized, there must be a process. And how do you guys also, make sure that the content that's done by your creators is, still, strong to the brand itself, and then making sure that you guys have this, like, a sort of culture that stays along all creators?
We have very strict brand guidelines. We also have an entire team dedicated to creator management. What most people don't realize is now, we were a few weeks ago, we were in the 40-person range. I think now we're at 52 employees. And so people hear, about Rug Radio, and they think, they think of like Froke's FOMO Hour show, and they might assume that it's a 3 or 4 person organization. But yeah, we're over 50 employees. I think 52 as of this week. We have resources across the board that focus on recruiting, onboarding, and approving content creators, and then managing the expectations and really like the brand guidelines around how they interact with and on behalf of the Rug Radio brand. A lot of these content creators have their own branded shows. They do their own thing, and they just very casually advertise that they are in the Rug Radio Creator Network. And what that does for them is it gives them a little bit of validation. Brands and audience know that they've been vetted, that these content creators, have a baseline, and not a baseline, like a very high standard, but like a baseline that we've set of knowledge, credibility, dedication, and consistency. So like that's the thing that people don't realize also, is like, you can have the smartest person in the world, but if they say that they're going to be a content creator and they only produce one piece of content, every 3 weeks, and then maybe they go 6 weeks without producing something, audiences can't rely on them for consistent information, and they never gain traction. You could be the most popular person in the world, but you're not going to gain traction if you aren't consistently delivering value for your audience. And so like that's actually one of the biggest the biggest KPIs and indicators for a content creator, whether or not they're going to survive within our ecosystem, is how dedicated and how consistent are they with their content creation.
Well, I like you talking about that, because like you're a marketing guy, and you just mentioned obviously the specific around KPIs and so on. So if a brand comes towards you and they're looking at specific content creators, how do they judge the ROI through some, your marketing channel, which is obviously Rug Radio, compared to other means of other marketing channels, let's say display advertisement and so on as well? What makes them believe so much into your ecosystem in terms of KPIs and direct metrics?
Brands, so brands ultimately, it's really funny. There's a few different metrics that are important in the advertising space. Ultimately, the only one that really matters when you're trying to sell something is consumer acquisition costs, right? You have CAC, this model, right? Or CPAs, cost per acquisition. And really, like if you talk to any CMO who's reporting to a CFO, who's then reporting to a CEO, the question is that comes from the top down is, okay, like, yeah, I get that you're buying media, I get that you're spending money. What I want to know is how much are each of these users costing me, right? Mm-hmm. Because I need to know from a top level CEO perspective, I need to know what my lifetime value of a user or a consumer is, and I need to know what they cost. And if it costs me $100 to acquire a user, but they're only spending $80, even on 100, let's say we had a 100% margin product, they're spending $80 over their lifetime, I'm losing $20 on every customer. Now, you tell me that I'm going to spend $1,000 to acquire a customer, but I know that this customer is going to spend $20,000 over their lifetime, or like, let's say within like the first 12 months even. They're going to spend $20,000 and say it's a $50,000 it's a 50% margin product on that 20,000 that they spend. I'm spending $1,000 to generate 9,000 in profit, right? Like that's a no-brainer. We do that all day long. Ultimately, like a smart CMO will generally look at their cash, and they'll determine what the consumer turnover rate is and really like the velocity of their capital, and they'll be able to say ultimately, if I can spend if I can spend $99 to generate $100 in revenue, profitable revenue, then we do it, right? As long as that number is net positive, you have a plus EV outcome, then you spend that money and you grow and you build that user base. And then it becomes up to like the product marketing team and all of those guys to maximize the lifetime value of the customer. For us, what happens in media is the majority of platforms are selling, or historically we're selling CPM, a cost per impression. They say we have 20 million people a month frequenting our platforms, and the cost per 1,000 impressions is $11.37, right? And so they say we're gonna deliver you, the metric for this campaign is we're gonna deliver you a set minimum number of impressions, and this is the cost associated with those minimum set number of impressions. If we exceed that, we won't charge you otherwise. It's like, but this is the KPI that we'll be held to. For us, because we're in an emerging technology, we're such blockchain, and it's such like a niche community, a niche space, but we have high net worth consumers within the audience base. We can't compete on a CPM type basis. And we can't even compete on like a CPA type basis if we are trying to deal with like the attribution and measuring like really like how much each consumer is generating in revenue for the platforms. But what we can do is I can tell you definitively that there is nobody else in our industry and in very few industries that can create the qualitative connection between the consumer and the brand that we can. And that's because we focus on storytelling, and we focus on driving narratives, and we focus on organic incorporation of brands into the way that we operate. And this goes just beyond the media that create. This extends all the way to the events that we produce. So like we produce events where we bring community together. We don't throw these parties where people can't talk to each other, and we have like DJs like blasting music in the background. We create environments for people to be able to network and to be able to meet the founders and the creators of products and brands, and to also get to know each other. And we bring our brand partners, our sponsors, into these events and give them these like really solid, organic, like strong consumer loyalty type events. And qualitatively, what we do is we elevate brands in the minds of the consumers beyond just brand awareness. We bring them from brand awareness, consumption aside, to a point of brand advocacy, where these consumers know that the brands that we work with are brands that we genuinely love, that we care about, and that they are impactful and significant to us. And so there is an obvious window for them to be impactful and significant to the user, right? And that's why we have companies like when companies like Arbitrum work with us, or companies like Uniswap. It's about reinforcing the brand loyalty between the consumer and the product and maximizing that lifetime value for the brand.
I was at one of those parties. That's what we met. So specifically what we were talking about.
Yep.
Okay, that's great. Okay, let's talk about numbers then. Like, how many listeners does Rug Radio get across all creators? How many creators do you have on Voice at 85? And yeah, just how big is the community in general? Over these past few years.
Yeah. So from the Rug Radio side specifically, right now we're measuring, and it fluctuates month over month. It really depends on market conditions, but somewhere between like 50 and 65 million impressions monthly on the Rug Radio side. Decrypt is doing about 50 million page views annually, represented by about 18 million unique users on Decrypt every year. So like when you look at the platform, right, and you can go to like other major like institutions like PC Mag, or even like like some of these other major tech publications, and some of these guys, like even if you look at like companies like Wired, right? Wired does something like 20 million impressions a month, or 20 million page views a month. We're collectively, like, we're more in the range of like 5 to 7 million. We're not on that level yet, right? But we're also operating within a super niche environment.
So, okay, so that's a good shift actually. Let's go to Decrypt, okay? So Decrypt is also a mega media giant. I would say in our space, in the crypto space, right? It's one of the main go-to
significant
outlets that our clients always ask all the time to get featured on, right? With the likes, I would say, of like the Block and so on, as a really trustworthy source of news. So I would love to dissect that model also with you today, because I think it's something that the listeners want to understand. You know, how does obviously a media giant like that obviously makes revenue, but at the same time, what does it take to grow this? Because you will have that chicken and egg problem of like, do we get the journalists first? Do we get the viewers first? Blah, 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 blah. You know, so tell us more about that. You know, how does first and foremost, for people that don't know Decrypt in general, how does it function? How do you guys separate the paid and obviously the journalist, everything together in general?
So let me give you a brief history on Decrypt. Decrypt was founded 2018. It was incubated by Consensus. Josh Quittner, Ryan Babinski, who was the founder of Code Academy, and Ilan Hazan, who's one of our other partners now too, came together and they created this platform with Joe Lubin and Consensus. It was incubated at Consensus to be a new media outlet that focused on blockchain in a tech optimistic way. In the first few years, they operated within Consensus, and then about 2.5 years ago, they spun out of Consensus and became independent. Still, Consensus and Consensus Mesh were on the cap table. Strong supporters, investors, and stakeholders in the platform. But the goal was a little bit more independence from the Ethereum ecosystem. For those who don't know, Consensus was one of the primary dev codes and service codes for the Ethereum Foundation and the Ethereum ecosystem. So Joe Lubin co-founded Ethereum, with Gavin and Vitalik, and a few others, and really became the powerhouse that ended up acquiring, incubating, or funding the majority of the early tooling for the Ethereum ecosystem, MetaMask included. MetaMask, and then a lot of like the block exploration and resolution that happens, all was happening within Consensus. And so, we, and by we, I mean Decrypt, had a really good footing to start. We had great support, we had great access, and we had, I don't want to say, because I love the team at CoinDesk. The guys at the Block and all that are fantastic as well. And so we don't see ourselves necessarily as competitive, but complementary to like the content and everything that they produce. But really, like, there's very few groups that started as crypto native and like authentically crypto native as Decrypt. It started at the source, right? So Decrypt, Decrypt grew again to now. Last year, the numbers last year it was a bearish market, but last year we did about 50 million page views, 18 million unique users on platform. It's a platform that employs dozens of employees and journalists and editors. We have a very small SpawnCon team over there that does sponsored content. The commercial team that we share between Rug Radio and Decrypt handles both. And we just acquired Lucky Trader and a few other platforms that are coming up that we'll announce in the future. They share those resources, but each company has its own editorial team. So our editor-in-chief at Decrypt, Guillermo, has a very specific mandate, and that mandate is to punch me in the throat and make sure that I don't encroach on the journalistic integrity and the editorial nature of Decrypt. So we call it within the space. It's some people call it like a great wall. Others call it a separation of church and state. And that's truly what it is, right? Commercial team does not interact with editorial at all. They are in completely different buildings than us, right? And it's like, if you can imagine, if we were on a physical campus, we would not operate in the same building. I would have separate buildings, and you would have to walk across the courtyard to have to go talk to editorial, and everyone would see you walking across, and everyone would know that you're up to something, right? And so it's like, you just don't do it. Like, that's a major faux pas. So we keep them on the other side of the campus. They operate with full journalistic integrity. We don't give them any amount of commercial pressure. Periodically, we have friends, and we have acquaintances and partners within the space that say, hey, we'd really like to get organic or like authentic coverage on Decrypt. And I say, what I can do is I can send an email to introduce you to our editor-in-chief. I will not introduce you to any of our journalists or any of our editors, but I'll introduce you to our editor-in-chief. And if you have something viable for them that they find topically relevant or interesting, like, they can run with it if they want. If they don't call me. Like, don't call me and bitch or moan or nag that you didn't get the brother-in-law deal, right? You didn't get you didn't get to skip the line. And everybody on our team, from the business and executive offices, operate under like these very strict premises. And it's something that I won't compromise on. The value that we have created at Decrypt in terms of journalistic integrity over the last 7 years is unparalleled. And so, that doesn't eliminate the reality and the need for commercialization and monetization of content. So, there's things like display advertising, you have banners, we have sponsored content. We have a team who, let's say a blockchain, for instance, let's say SUI or Arbitrum or Uniswap, or someone wants to produce commercialized and sponsored content. They go to that team and they say, hey, can we get more advertorial type pieces? Can we get sponsored content? Can we create branded content? This is what we're hoping to accomplish. Same thing like the Rug Radio side. This is how we're trying to accomplish our mission. These are our KPIs. What we usually do is we usually sell them packages that span across Rug Radio, Decrypt, Lucky Trader, and our independent content creators, and give them a package to get exposure in all these areas. And then, of course, proper disclosures, FTC compliant disclosures, and everything across the board to make sure that we never advertise something that isn't clearly demonstrated to audience as an advertisement.
That makes sense. I mean, it's very similar to a lot of these media companies, especially, for example, I was speaking to Tim at the Block as well, pure separation between commercial journalists and journalists in terms of journalistic integrity, to the fullest, which makes sense to every media outlet. It should be like that, So in general, if someone wanted to start, let's say, a media platform or media company, because you are the professional at this, you've done 2 of them now, how does that work from that perspective? Do you start by creating a news platform first, by, getting journalists on the platform to then start creating the content to attract the eyeballs? When do you actually trigger in the commercialization of everything? What's kind of like, the fine line between everything now? Obviously that you're a media professional in the space, expert would say.
If I was going to do it again today, I would do it completely differently than the way we have done in the past. And that's because tooling has changed. I'll say this, and this is like really like if someone wanted to do this, there's a clear path to success. But the caveat I will give is I love working in media. I love owning media platforms. And I love like the weight and the responsibility of being a CEO of Decrypt and CEO at Rug Radio. That said, I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. There's a certain level of masochism that you have to have, right? Like you got to be sick. Like you got to be genuinely sick to want to do this. But if you're that level of sick and you want to do it, there's like where there's a will, there's a way. I would say being undercapitalized is like the cardinal sin of media. It is unbelievably expensive to do this. And for most people, it never pays off. If you look at media companies across the board, there are more distressed assets in traditional media and publishing than any other industry right now, which is great for me because I can acquire companies, and add them to our portfolio. Yeah. Literally, it's just like it's like mining. It's fantastic, but it's not. There's a whole plan here, right? I have this roadmap and what we're going to accomplish. But what happens is guys either spend too much money trying to build distribution content distribution early. So like I'll go back to one of Farouk's most favorite phrases and like taglines, and that is that content is king, but distribution is queen. And ultimately, like, we create content, we aggregate content, we compile as much content as we can in order to get the distribution that will end up supporting that content and support the commercialization later, right? What happens is the life cycle for content creators and media is extremely short because people try to commercialize too quickly and they exhaust their entire pipeline. They exhaust their pipeline, and in order to grow revenues, they have to hire more people that have relationships, that have these pipelines, or they have to lean in on agency models, and agencies are tough. There are some agencies that are really, really stellar, but ultimately, like, pulling revenue from an agency model, unless you're well versed and experienced in it, and you have a great sustainable relationship, you're gonna lose. Like, you're gonna lose. The agency's gonna win every time, and you are gonna lose every time. Like, I've seen it in industry after industry after industry, right? So it's really tough. That being said, like, agencies serve a very specific purpose, and most people running these agencies are pretty brilliant, right? And it's like, if you can figure out how to work with them, that's the best scenario. None of us in media want to run a service co. Like, we want to create media, we want to create content, we don't want to run the service co. But you got to figure out that vibe and get in that groove. And if you can, then you'll cook. What I would say, though, is, like, going back to the shortcut here, is that AI agents and LLMs are your friend, not in content creation, but in aggregation. And the value here, when I look at, like, the world, every industry is hyper saturated across the board, right? There's more content. The barrier to entry for content creation is so low. There's more content being created on a daily basis now than there has ever been. And every day, that number of, like, unique content pieces created actually goes up, right? It's like, it's growing. And so why would you spend the time, money, energy, and resources in creating content when you could find people who are ideologically aligned, who are philosophically aligned with you, who have the level of intellect, level of integrity, and drive that you do, and bring them together? Whether it's with their permission and collectively putting together a collective and building off of, like, economies of scale together, or just using an AI agent to aggregate other people's content and bring it together into a news aggregation platform, right? That's the alpha, right? Bootstrap and scale. And when you have distribution and you have usership and you have, like, a sustainable amount of traffic, then you can commercialize. But you can't commercialize at the expense of either the advertiser or the audience, right? It's a tough balance to strike.
Well, I mean, okay, talking about aggregation and then talking about the business model in general. For example, I spoke to Jason at Blockworks, and obviously they have permissionless, as a specific event to drive a lot of revenue. And listening to Jason on a specific podcast, he breaks down obviously the revenue models, and the event is huge. That's how they started, right? Is that something that in the next 5 to 10 years you guys are looking to do as well? Some sort of, like, similar model of event, or is that not on the cards at the moment? Or what do you think about that model in general as well?
No. Look, we have a very specific, like, our model is very specific. Like, Yano and like, those guys are brilliant. Also, if you look at, like, CoinDesk and the consensus event that they throw, also brilliant. It's not our forte, like, these guys are really good at that. For us, I don't know if you've heard, like, in the startup space, there's the little adage, OPM, other people's money. And it's like, you raise capital and use other people's money to scale. For us, like, we've always played the OPE game, other people's events. Like, there's people who are going to throw events better than we do, and we do the side event, and we throw networking hours and cocktail parties, and we curate small groups of people, because I find it more impactful to have small groups of people become brand advocates when your core competency isn't throwing, like, major conferences. And then we just show up and we support consensus and we support permissionless. I speak at those events, events like that. I speak at consensus every year. We speak at events like Token, and we throw side events, and generally, like, we speak with the teams when we do that, and help optimize for like the best timing and everything to ensure that we have like the best turnout and support their user bases. Because again, we're super collaborative. We're not very competitive, with other media platforms. And it is truly because our core competencies are a little bit different, right? So I would say like definitively, you will see us play bigger parts in conferences in the coming months and years. But we, like Decrypt, Rug Radio will not have their own major conferences.
It makes sense. I was always being intrigued, by, everyone's different strategy in the space in general, how to grow, and that's very good the way you put it, especially from the fact that like you guys are more focused on those, smaller niche events where you do actually create, sometimes better bonds and everything. I mean, that's how I met you, and that's how I met like loads of people at the event face to face. It was insane. Like the CEO of Arbitrum was there as well, one of the co-founders, I do believe. So
and let me like set like for the record, like ultimately, our events would be largely impossible if it wasn't for guys like Sarah and like the team, and Sam Ewan and the team over at CoinDesk throwing consensus. Like if they weren't doing that, we wouldn't be able to bring the volume of people together that we do, right? KBW, token, permissionless. When we throw events, satellite events, like in and around their events, they bring, like these guys do an incredible job of bringing tens of thousands of people together into one place. And then, and then we take a small community and we create personal relationships within that community. And we just, we do that year over year, and we love supporting permissionless, consensus, and the rest of those events, because they really are impactful, not only for the industry, but for us. So.
That's amazing. We're nearly at the end of the interview. I know it's a bit longer than we expected because this conversation is so amazing right now with you. In terms of the crypto space in general, the next 5 to 10 years, as a media platform, you guys get so much information. Also understanding where everything's going, just because obviously you're seeing both sides of the spectrum, the Web2 brands wanting more exposure and so on as well. Where do you think everything's going now? In the next 5 to 10 years in general.
Yeah, look, I think blockchain as advanced database management and as like an underlying infrastructural layer of the internet is inevitable. I think cryptocurrency, because of blockchain, is also inevitable. I also look at like some of these major zeitgeists and catalysts from macroeconomic and macro political externalities that are creating the inevitability of digital currency and decentralization. I've been a crypto maxi, a Bitcoin holder for almost 12 years now. I've been an absolute fanatic of Ethereum and utility tokens and chains since 2017. And at this point, like, it's not fair to ask someone like me, because it's become a core part of my identity and like my ethos, right? My philosophy on life in general. It really also feeds into like my anti-authoritarianism, which is like kind of like a challenging, like dark, it's like a dangerous place to go, right? But it really supports like that, there's like that confirmation bias. Look, I'm super bullish on people operating intellectually and independently and self-regulating. I think that the nation states and governments will continue to present serious problems for that ethos and those philosophies, but also just for citizens and persons in general. Times are different, and I think that what the nation state was 50 years ago isn't what it is today. I think that when you look back historically on things like feudalism and chivalry, and we kind of laugh at some of these like antiquated cultural phenomenons, and I really think that patriotism, and I hate to say this because this makes me sound like a cynic, patriotism in the nation state probably won't exist in 50 years the way that it did 50 years ago, or that it even does today. There will always be the Luddites, the neo-Luddites that hold on to what was. But I think we need to embrace the age of sovereignty. We need to embrace the fact that travel and communication is easier now than it ever was. You're in Dubai. I travel probably 180 to 200 days out of the year. I'm rarely at home, and it's because the world's become so accessible. And what does that mean? It means that the nation state in the home doesn't play the same role today that it did. People can be free, people can be sovereign, and we often live and govern ourselves by the rules of 7 different jurisdictions at any given time, right? It's like I personally have exposure to multiple countries and multiple continents in terms of where my businesses are established, where my homes are, right? Where I spend my time. And it's because of that people are going to become more and more intolerant of the idea of prescribing to a set rule, a specific set of rules that were determined by geographic location. When that happens, and when that becomes more prolific, that general anti-authoritarianism, right, maybe becomes more prolific. The only outlets are going to be decentralized currencies. People will not want to keep their money tied to a geographic jurisdiction, right? I would rather keep my money on chain than keep it in a bank, right? I've been doing it for years and it serves me just fine. And I think more and more people, as they become comfortable with it, will see that. I think the future of crypto and the future of blockchain, the future of emerging technologies and things that we haven't even thought of is extremely bright. You will not stifle the evolution of the expansion of the human mind in technological innovation. So why try?
Completely agree on those points. The same concepts I've been pushing towards everyone in my space, and as you mentioned before, with globalization and all these other factors, people are agreeing it more and more day by day. Every time you go to one of these conferences, you look at it, the crypto is never going to die. There's too much people that believe the same notions that we believe in the space as well. But yeah, that's great to know. And last and in terms of questions, I would say, where do you see Decrypt going in the next few years? What's kind of the future plans? Maybe some alpha source you can give us.
Yep. We traditional publishing model is very challenging. We've spent the last year looking at alternative business units for Decrypt. We started in Q1 of this year building a prediction market. The product is functional and is live in closed beta today. We think that aside from just selling advertising, a big piece of the future of media and the monetization, commercialization of media is going to be products like prediction markets that give users and consumers of content the ability to participate in the economic impact of media, participate in both the upside and also sometimes the downsides, but be able to play the game that is the aggregation of consumer sentiment. And that's where we're headed. So the product Myriad will be live for all users, not just in our closed beta, in the coming weeks. And it's a fun way, changes the way that people engage with content, changes the way that the monetization cycle and the value cycle of content is distributed. But it also ultimately, I think, just changes the way that we see information and the way that we socialize information that is published and distributed online. And so I think what you'll see is over the next 5 years, Rug Radio and Decrypt, we will continue to innovate in technologically empowered business units that will move the needle for content creators and for publishers, and instead of just being an outlet that reports on crypto and blockchain as the what of our subject matter, you'll start to see it become more and more of the how we use it to engage will become hopefully kind of a blockbuster use case, and really show the world that there are ways to use blockchain and that advanced database management to change even the most unsuspecting of business models, right? Or the most unobvious of business models for the better. And so that's where we're headed.
Amazing. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I know it was a bit more than we expected, but great conversation so far.
Oh,
thank you so much for the insights. It was amazing for the audience in general. Hopefully we catch each other up soon. We're looking forward to the launch of this prediction market and tools. So yeah, great chat, and yeah, we'll see each other soon.
Sounds good. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Perfect.